They called her a failure, but she secretly became the boss. While her family praised her brother, she saved their company in silence. When the truth came out, they were left speechless and she finally claimed her legacy. Have you ever felt invisible to the very people who should see you most clearly? Have you ever had your worth dismissed by those whose approval you once craved? Imagine working tirelessly in silence, building something extraordinary, only to be labeled a failure by your family until the day you unveil a truth so profound, it changes everything. That's my story, a story of quiet triumphs and a revelation that shattered decades of misunderstanding. My name is Camila Johnson. Let me take you back to where it all began, a childhood overshadowed by a family legacy I was never meant to claim. Before we dive deeper, let me know where you're listening from. If this story resonates with you, hit that subscribe button. There's more to come. I'm 35 now, living in Chicago where the skyline sparkles with promise and the hum of ambition fuels my days. But growing up in the North Shore suburbs, in a sprawling 5,000 square foot house that felt more like a museum than a home, I was always the outlier in the Johnson family portrait. My father, Richard Johnson, founded Johnson Industries, an electrical components manufacturer. Starting from a single warehouse in 1990, he grew it into a mid-sized empire by the time I was born. To him, the company wasn't just a business. It was his identity, his true child. Every dinner conversation circled around production quotas and supplier contracts. Every holiday doubled as a networking event for potential investors. My mother, Eleanor, played her role gracefully, keeping our lives polished while Dad poured his soul into the factory floor. Then there was my brother, David, 4 years older than me and at 39, the golden heir. From age 15, he shadowed Dad at the plant, absorbing the rhythm of machines and the heavy weight of expectation. And me? I was the question mark, the daughter who never quite fit the mold. While Dad and David respected the tangible, the circuit boards and assembly lines, I was captivated by the invisible forces of finance. They saw physical components. I saw capital flows and market inefficiencies. I didn't want to build things. I wanted to orchestrate the forces that made building possible. But to Dad, finance was nothing more than a necessary evil, a game of paper pushing unworthy of a Johnson. When I told him I planned to study finance at Northwestern, he sighed heavily, as if I had chosen a path of frivolity over legacy. That sigh planted a seed of resolve deep inside me, a quiet vow to prove my worth even if he refused to see it. The Chicago skyline became my sanctuary, a constellation of glass and steel that mirrored the ambition I'd nurtured since leaving home at 18. I threw myself into my studies at Northwestern, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in finance. My name etched in gold on the dean's list. Of course, that achievement went unnoticed by my family, but it opened doors to Meridian Partners, a boutique investment firm specializing in industrial turnarounds. There, I built a reputation as a strategist who could spot value in struggling companies, saving jobs and restoring balance sheets. By 30, I managed portfolios worth tens of millions of dollars. My office perched on the 35th floor of a downtown tower, overlooking the restless waves of Lake Michigan. Yet, no matter how high I climbed, the weight of my family's indifference pressed against me. Family gatherings at our North Shore home became rituals of exclusion. I'd arrive clutching a bottle of Cabernet, a kind of emotional armor, only to watch Dad proudly introduce David as my son, the future of Johnson Industries. Me, this is Camila, my daughter. Flat, as if no elaboration was needed. Eventually, I stopped sharing my achievements, promotions, deals closed, industry awards. They all dissolved in the face of Dad's disinterest. Once, at a Christmas party disguised as a networking event, I overheard him tell a colleague, "Women in banking? They'll chew her up in 5 years." I was 28 then, already outlasting his prediction. But the sting of his words lingered. David, too, played his part. His brotherly affection often laced with condescension. "How's life moving papers around, Milla?" he'd tease, clapping my shoulder like I was a child pretending to do business. I'd force a smile, swallow my response, and sip my wine. At least my small, 200 square foot downtown apartment called me back to a world where I was seen. By 2018, the financial crisis had begun rippling through the manufacturing sector. I started hearing whispers not from my family, but from industry contacts. Johnson Industries was in serious trouble. The company had expanded too aggressively, sinking $10 million into new facilities based on orders that never materialized. By early 2019, it was teetering on the brink of bankruptcy. Cash reserves were depleted. Banks were turning them down for loans. And the factory, the very heart of my family's legacy, was facing a fire sale. But how did I learn this? Not from Dad. He would rather face financial ruin than admit vulnerability to his daughter. Not from David either. His pride mirrored Dad's to a fault. They didn't call. They didn't ask for help. Even though saving distressed companies was exactly what I did for a living. The realization cut deeper than I expected. Dad would rather approach every bank in Chicago than seek help from his paper-pushing daughter. That night, sitting in my small apartment, the city lights glowing beyond my window, I wrestled with a choice. I could let Johnson Industries collapse, proving Dad wrong once and for all. Or I could act, not for their approval, but for the legacy I couldn't completely walk away from. The decision crystallized in the quiet of that evening. I would step into the shadows. I would use the expertise they had always belittled. That spring, I stood before Meridian Partners Investment Committee. I pitched the acquisition of a struggling but salvageable manufacturing company. I was transparent about my family connection and recused myself from the final vote. Yet, my argument was relentless. Johnson Industries was undervalued. Yes, the debt was overwhelming, but it had a loyal client base and real potential if managed properly. The committee approved a $15 million investment, a lifeline, disguised as a business deal, and they assigned me to oversee the turnaround. To protect my family's pride and shield the process from Dad's interference, I appointed my trusted colleague, Alex Chen, as the face of the investment. His name would appear on all documents. His face would be the one Dad and David saw. They would never suspect that I now held 51% ownership of their life's work. By June, Dad signed the papers. He believed Alex represented a group of faceless investors. He had no idea that his daughter now controlled the majority stake in Johnson Industries. From my office on the 35th floor, I quietly became the architect of the company's revival. I restructured $8 million in debt. I streamlined supplier contracts. I approved upgrades to outdated equipment. Every decision was a tightrope walk, preserving the factory's core while fortifying its finances. Alex relayed my directives. His calm demeanor acted as a buffer against Dad's inevitable grumbling about spreadsheet-obsessed outsiders. At family gatherings, I listened patiently as Dad and David criticized the meddling investors. I nodded sympathetically. I kept my secret. The irony was sharp. Every modernization they praised, every successful contract they celebrated bore my invisible signature. Over the next 2 years, the company stabilized. Cash reserves climbed to $5 million. Orders flowed in again, but the weight of my secret grew heavier. Each visit home, each dismissive nod from Dad, each condescending smile from David reminded me why I had chosen secrecy in the first place. I hadn't planned to reveal my role. I was content to let the factory thrive under their illusion of control. But secrets, like fault lines, tend to crack under pressure, and mine was about to rupture at the most unexpected of family gatherings. Thanksgiving 2024. Thanksgiving 2024 arrived cold and tense. I walked into my parents' North Shore home clutching a bottle of Pinot Noir, the same emotional armor I'd carried to every family gathering for years. Mom greeted me with a too-tight hug. David gave me his usual smirk. "How's life moving papers around, Milla?" he teased. I smiled politely. I was used to the jabs. The dining room shimmered with crystal and silver. The turkey was carved. The wine was poured. Conversation followed its usual script, Dad and David dissecting production details. Mom and David's wife, Caroline, chatting about charity galas. Then Dad set down his fork with deliberate weight. He announced the company's turnaround. He praised David's exemplary leadership, and he unveiled a reckless plan, a $20 million buyback to reclaim control from the so-called meddling investors. My stomach tightened. The company's $5 million reserves couldn't support that kind of debt. If they tried, it could destroy everything I had rebuilt. I couldn't stay silent. Is that financially sound? I asked. Dad's eyes narrowed. Not everything's about numbers, Camila. Pride matters. More than your balance sheets, David sneered. Some of us build things, not just analyze them. That was the last straw. The dismissal, the arrogance, the complete blindness. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. The company was 3 months from collapse 2 years ago. Why do you think it recovered? Dad scoffed. We adapted. We fought back. I took a deep breath. No, I saved Johnson Industries. The room went dead silent. I'm the investor who bought 51% in 2019. I restructured your debt. I approved every major decision since then. Mom's eyes widened in shock. Caroline looked down at her napkin. Dad's face turned pale. David looked like I had just spoken a foreign language. I pulled out a folded document from my purse and slid it across the table. My signature is at the bottom. Your buyback proposal? It requires my approval. And it's not happening. That night, back in my apartment, the Chicago skyline glittered silently. My phone blew up texts from Mom, voicemails from David. But Dad? Nothing. The next morning, Dad and David showed up at Meridian's 35th floor office with their attorney. Their anger filled the room. You lied, Dad accused. You let us negotiate like fools. I stood my ground. I disclosed everything to my committee. Would you have accepted my help if I'd offered it openly? Silence. David tried again. You manipulated us. No, I said. I protected the company when your pride almost destroyed it. Their lawyer demanded the buyback proceed. I shook my head. The company can't afford it. But I'll offer you something else. I slid a new proposal across the table. A 3-year plan for gradual family ownership, tied to financial benchmarks. If you want to reclaim Johnson Industries, it'll be through stability, not debt. Dad's eyes softened, just a fraction. A crack in the armor. Weeks later, a package arrived at my office. Inside was a framed photo of me as a little girl standing on the factory floor beside Dad. A note was tucked behind it. I lost sight of the daughter who asked fearless questions. I'd like to start again. Christmas Eve, p.m., just family. That Christmas, I walked into the house under falling snow. Mom hugged me tightly. I'm sorry for staying silent all those years. Dad's voice, rough with emotion, followed. I was wrong to box you into my version of legacy. David, still bristling, managed to say, you played us but you saved us too. We talked, really talked. For the first time in decades, the Johnson family faced the truth, our mistakes, our pride, our shared love for the company. By January 2025, I officially became CFO of Johnson Industries. Dad remained chairman. David ran operations. I handled the finances. At our first executive session, I flagged an $8 million acquisition that had wildly optimistic projections. David frowned, then nodded. You're right. We'll pause the deal. It was the smallest of victories, but it was real progress. Spring 2025 bloomed. Under our leadership, the company secured a $12 million contract. The factory, the same 200,000 square foot facility that had once felt like a cage now felt like a canvas where my financial insight and David's operational know-how blended. That Easter Sunday, Dad handed me a new company charter. Our names, mine, his, and David signed at the bottom. This is your legacy too, he said. As the Chicago skyline glimmered outside my apartment window that night, I spread out the clippings Dad had secretly collected of my career. Awards, profiles, accomplishments. He had been watching, maybe not saying it, but watching. And I realized true strength isn't proving others wrong. It's building something enduring despite their doubt. Family wounds don't heal overnight, but they mend through honesty, effort, and a willingness to start again. I had found my place, not just in the family, but in